He was only trying to protect the one person he had left. No noise, no trouble, just a quiet act of love that should have gone unnoticed. But in a place where judgment comes before truth, it cost him everything. One moment, he was working, surviving. The next, he was humiliated, accused, and thrown out like he didn't belong. And while others looked away, one woman saw everything. What she chose to do next didn't just change his life. It exposed something far deeper. The question is, why did it take her to see what everyone else ignored? Every morning before the city fully woke up, he was already there, quietly setting tables, wiping down surfaces, making sure everything looked perfect long before the first customer walked in. For him, this job wasn't just about earning a paycheck. It was survival. It was responsibility. It was the only thing standing between stability and everything falling apart. Behind his tired eyes was a life no one at the restaurant ever stopped to ask about. Long nights, constant worry, and a burden he carried alone. While others joked and moved through their shifts without a second thought, he moved carefully, always aware, always cautious, as if one mistake could cost him more than just his job. And in a place where people like him were often judged before being understood, that fear wasn't unfounded. Most customers barely noticed him. Some did, but not in the way that mattered. Quick glances, quiet assumptions, subtle looks that said more than words ever could. He had learned to ignore it, to keep his head down and do his work, because he couldn't afford anything else. But on this particular day, something felt different. The air was tense. The stares lingered a little longer. And somewhere between doing what he thought was right and trying to hold everything together, a single moment was about to unravel it all. He just didn't know it yet. It started with something small. So small most people wouldn't have thought twice about it. A quick glance from across the room. Then another. And another. The kind of attention that didn't feel normal, the kind that made his hands slow down, just slightly, as he tried to focus on his work. A customer had been watching him. Not casually, but intensely, following every movement, every step he took between tables. At first, he told himself it was nothing. People stared sometimes. He was used to that, but this felt different, heavier, like a judgment already made before a single word had been spoken. Then came the whisper, low, sharp, urgent enough to pull others into it. Heads began to turn. Conversations shifted. The calm rhythm of the restaurant started to crack, piece by piece. And suddenly, all eyes were on him. He could feel it. His chest tightened, but he kept moving, trying to stay invisible in a moment that was quickly doing the opposite. He adjusted the tray in his hands, steadying it, reminding himself to stay calm, to not react, to not give anyone a reason. But it was already too late. A manager approached, fast, tense, and visibly irritated. No questions. No pause. Just a look that carried more accusation than concern. The kind of look that said a decision had already been made. The words came quickly after that. Not loud, but sharp enough to cut through everything around them. Enough for nearby tables to hear. Enough for people to start watching more closely. Something had been said about him. Something serious. He tried to explain, tried to make sense of what was happening, but there was no space for it. No room for his side. Every attempt to speak felt like it disappeared before it could even land. Around him, the room shifted again. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others leaned in, curious. But no one stepped forward. No one asked questions. Because in that moment, he wasn't just a worker anymore. He was a suspect. And the weight of that label pressed down hard. The manager's tone grew colder, more final. A decision was forming right there in front of everyone. And it wasn't in his favor. It didn't matter how hard he had worked, how many hours he had given, or what he was carrying outside those walls. None of that mattered now. What mattered was how he was being seen. And in a place where assumptions could move faster than truth, that was everything. His hands trembled slightly as he set the tray down. His voice, barely steady, tried one last time to break through the noise, to reach someone, anyone, who might actually listen. But the room had already chosen its side. And just as the final words were about to be said, someone unexpected stood up, watching, waiting, about to change everything. The final words came down like a verdict. He was done. No investigation. No proof. Just a quiet accusation turned into a public humiliation. In front of customers, coworkers, strangers, his world collapsed in seconds. His chest felt tight, his thoughts scattered, and for a moment, he couldn't even move. Not because he didn't want to, but because he knew this wasn't just about losing a job. It was about being judged and discarded. The manager stepped closer, voice colder now, final. There was no anger left in it, just certainty. The kind that didn't need evidence. The kind that came from assumption, from bias, from something deeper that had been there long before this moment. And still he tried. One last attempt. One last breath of courage to explain why he had stepped away earlier, why he had risked everything for something that mattered more than this job. But his words never fully landed. They were brushed aside, dismissed like they carried no weight. Because to them, he didn't. The room stayed silent. No one spoke. No one defended him. Dozens of people watching a man's life unravel, and not a single voice strong enough to stop it. Except one. A chair scraped sharply against the floor. The sound cut through everything. Heads turned. Conversations froze. And for the first time since it all began, the attention shifted away from him. She stood there, calm, composed, but with a presence that felt impossible to ignore. Her eyes didn't wander. They didn't hesitate. They were fixed directly on the manager, then slowly on him. She had seen it all. Every glance, every assumption, every second where truth was ignored. And as she took a step forward, the energy in the room changed completely. The same people who had stayed silent now leaned in, uncertain, sensing that something far bigger was about to unfold. Because this wasn't just another customer, and whatever she was about to say wasn't going to be ignored. She didn't raise her voice, but she didn't need to. With calm precision, she stepped forward and made one thing clear. She had been watching from the very beginning. Every assumption, every glance, every moment where judgment replaced truth. And unlike everyone else in that room, she wasn't willing to let it pass. What followed was immediate and irreversible. The same authority that had dismissed him now shifted. Questions were finally asked. The story that had been silenced just moments ago was heard in full. And piece by piece, the truth came out. He hadn't done anything wrong. He had stepped away for something no one else had cared to understand, something human. The room that once felt heavy with judgment now filled with something else. Silence. Not the kind that ignores, but the kind that realizes. By the end of it, the decision was undone. The apology came, but it came too late to erase what had already been done. Because while a job could be given back, dignity didn't return so easily. And for him, everything had changed. He walked out of that place not just as someone who had been wronged, but as someone who had been seen, truly seen, not for assumptions, not for stereotypes, but for who he really was. But here's the truth most people in that room had to face. It shouldn't have taken her. It shouldn't take power, status, or influence for someone's humanity to be recognized. It shouldn't take a moment of public humiliation for people to question their own biases. Because this wasn't just his story. It's happening every day to people who don't have someone standing up for them. People whose voices never get heard. People who don't get a second chance. So the question is, how many more lives have to be shaken before we stop judging and start seeing?